So far up to this point, we've seen 2 new professions since 2019 brought us Classic WoW. That's dual crafting in TBC and inscription in Wrath of the Lich King. Both well-used, well-needed professions which are classed as primary professions. In Cataclysm, however, we get a new profession, but it's just a secondary profession. You could say all secondary professions are optional, like fishing as an example. Yes, fishing has its uses, but ultimately you can buy whatever you need from the auction house without needing to ever fish. Same goes with cooking. Of course, you'll have a better time and save gold cooking yourself, but are you really missing out on anything? I'd probably say no. You're probably assuming Archaeology is the same, but you're wrong. Archaeology brings some of the best starter items in the game, and when I say starter items, I don't mean level 1, I mean level 85. Picture this, you've leveled an alt, and let's say it's a warrior, as an example. You can send this absolute beast of a weapon to it straight away, if you've been lucky enough to solve this on your main. Reason being, the big items that people go for when doing their archaeology are all bind on account. We will have a look at all of those in a minute, but first, how does archaeology work, and are you only doing it for those 359 item level epics? Which, by the way, is equivalent to normal raid gear or exalted reputation gear, so it's a good item level. The only thing you're really going to replace them with is heroic raid gear. Now the short answer is no, you aren't just doing it for 359 gear, but that will become obvious as we go through this video. The premise of archaeology is fairly simple. Once you've visited the trainer and got the skill, you open your map and you'll start to find dig sites. You travel around the dig sites surveying and then get fragments depending on what type of dig site you just surveyed at. You then use these fragments to solve artifacts. Once you first arrive and use your survey ability for the first time, you'll either be extremely lucky and a lootable pile will appear on the floor and that's your first yield of fragments, or more commonly a telescope will appear next to you with a light on it being either red, yellow or green. The direction the telescope is pointing in is the way that you need to go, and the colour represents the rough distance you need to travel. If it's green, you typically don't have to go very far, maybe between 10 and 15 yards. If it's yellow, it could be 30 to 40 yards away. And if it's red, you're probably miles away still, so you could travel 100 yards-ish safely before you survey again. But what you basically want to do is go by the light and then travel a little way and survey again. Rinse and repeat until you can dig up the fragments. Here's some facts about dig sites, which actually I found on this leveling guide here when I was doing archaeology myself recently. There's only ever 4 dig sites on a continent at any time. A dig site will disappear after you survey and find fragments 3 times. A new dig site will appear at a random place on the continent after you clear a currently available dig site. Dig sites become available on more continents like Outland and Northrend as you get to higher skill levels, and all dig sites are player specific. This means that you don't have to worry about any other player stealing your finds like they can with mining or herbalism. They can't see anything that you survey. In terms of where it's set at higher levels, you get access to other continents like Outland and Northrend. From 1 to 300, you can get Dwarf, Fossil, Night Elf and Troll. From 300 to 375, you can also get Draenei and Orc, which are both dig sites in Outland. At 475 to 450, you can get Nerubian and Vrykul, which are both dig sites in Northrend. And finally, at 450, you can get Tolvir, which are basically the highest level ones you can get, and they're in Oldham. Now, aside from the fragments, you can also get keystones. These keystones can actually be sold on the auction house, which is a decent way of making gold, especially on top of some of the venerable artifacts you'll be cashing in from, because some of the grey items sell for a lot. We're talking hundreds of gold, not like a couple of gold. You've got to get lucky, but still, it's a decent profession for if you're aiming at trying to get something like the sword, or you're trying to get the staff or the trinket, and also making a bit of gold along the way. Pretty good. How the keystones work, though, is you'll find these slots below the current artifact you're trying to solve. Depending on how many fragments it needs to solve will depend on how many slots there are for keystones, as a keystone is equal to 12 fragments. They are race specific, so you'll have dwarf keystones, fossil keystones, etc., and only the correct ones fit in the artifact that you're trying to solve. But this is why certain keystones will always sell much better, such as Troll, because it's where you can get the sexy two-handed sword. So Troll keystones, people will just be buying to try and just make archaeology like so much faster. They want to get from one solve to the next to try and get the sword as quickly as possible. There's tons of pets and mounts and toys that you can get, but like I said at the start, I'm sure most of you are going to want to get the bind on account gear for your future alts. I'll put a link in the description to a full list of what you can solve and how much gold each solve is worth, but let's focus on the big ones. The first would be Tyrann's favourite doll, which is a really solid level 85 trinket with 321 intellect, and then it's got a use ability on it. While you've got it equipped, you recapture 20% of the base mana cost of your spells and store it within the doll to be released at a later time. up to 4.2k mana. And then when you use it, you're going to get that 4.2k mana back, and it's going to do damage to everyone within 15 yards. Whilst you would consider this a healer trinket, quite honestly, as a starter trinket for any spellcaster, I would put this on just to tide me over until maybe I got Darkmoon Car Volcano, Thoralian's Mirror, Bell, anything like that. But ultimately, I'd be happy to use this to go into raids with. To get the trinket, this comes from Night Elf artifacts. Next up from Dwarf artifacts, it's Staff of Sorcerer Thane Thorazan's, but it's very nice. Again, level 85, 359 eye level, so this is normal raid eye level with a load of spell power, crit, haste, stamina, and intellect. And again, just remember, you can send this to your freshly dinged ult, and it's got like an amazing weapon instantly. From fossil dig sites, you can get the Extinct Turtle Shield, which is just a tanking shield as you would expect. Not really a lot to say there. But the big one, which everyone's going to want, is Zimrock, Destroyer of Worlds. A two-handed sword with loads of strength, stamina, crit, and hit. It is quite literally an amazing starter weapon for anyone. You could literally clear all heroic content as a two-handed user using this sword. It's that good. Don't get me wrong, obviously heroic is going to be much better, but being able to use this right off the bat on any ult you will absolutely love. And this is a troll artifact, like I said, so there's going to be lots of people wanting to pay lots of gold for troll keystones. There's 3 level 85 items from Tolvir, and they're all very, very good. The first is Ring of the Boy Emperor, which is haste, mastery, int, stamina. So again, you could just use this on any caster or any healer as soon as you ding 85. Tolvir also has a one-handed sword, which is Scimitar of the Sirocco, with strength, stamina, crit, haste. So single-minded Fury Warriors could use this, or any tanks, and it does actually have quite a nice, unique look. And then finally, there's another staff, which is Staff of Amunet, which again is another caster staff, but this time it's a spirit-based staff. You can get a couple of mounts as well, like the Fossilized Raptor being an extremely common one, I would say, which I don't see any issues with getting. But then the AQ Battle Tank mount, this is just a bit of a nightmare, mainly because it only comes from Tolvir dig sites, which, as we've discussed, there's far less of because they only come from one single zone, which is Oldham. There's one item which, if you're an alchemist, a gold maker, or just like cool mounts, you're definitely going to want to get, and that's the Sandstone Drake, or Vial of the Sands, whichever you want to call it. Vial of the Sands transforms you into a dragon and allows you to carry someone around. So having a multi-person mount that can be bought and sold on the auction house, and it's only alchemists who also have archaeology that have access to the recipe, you can guess it's going to be pretty pricey. And when I tell you a few other bits, you'll understand why it's extremely pricey. But first, to get it, you'll need to be an alchemist who's out doing archaeology. You're specifically looking for Tolvir dig sites in Oldham. You want to keep solving Tolvir artifacts, and you're not trying to solve something super rare here. You literally just need one of the common solves, which is a canopic jar. The thing is, just because you solve a canopic jar doesn't mean that you're going to get the recipe. It's around a 10% chance to get the recipe, and who knows how many solves before it pops up again to be solved for a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, however many solves it's going to take. It can be quite a brutal farm, but that's why it's remained one of the best gold making methods for years and years since original cata. That's because, yes, as I said, it can be sold on the auction house, not the recipe, the mount itself. The thing is, the mats are ridiculous. It's such a large layout to make it that it's always going to be worth a lot, especially when you have to lay out around 29,000 gold of just vendor mats. Yep, about 29k. Although with things like bartering, which is a guild perk, you can get that price down a little bit. But looking at this blog post from the Lazy Gold Maker back in Legion, he was selling loads of these and made a profit of 3 to 400k across those sales. But I do think there's a couple of reasons this will remain lucrative in Classic. Most people will do archaeology on their main. It's a long grind that most sane people won't want to do more than once. Most mains aren't alchemy. I know there'll be plenty of alchemy mains, but you get my point. So many people are engineering dual crafting or engineering tailoring, and the power of those doesn't change in Cataclysm, so likely the engineering bubble isn't going to burst for a while, meaning there's just less people having the chance to even get the recipe from the jars. I see it as being something people will spend ludicrous gold on to buy when the first few are listed, myself included. And it's mainly because being able to carry my ult around is beautiful. If you're like me and you've got 2 accounts, being able to just have them both mount on the same mount and fly somewhere is like, it's worth the gold. But I'll probably farm it myself rather than buy it on the auction house, I think. No, definitely won't. I'm lazy. The last thing I want to touch on is the power of archaeology in dungeons. And you're probably like, what? You can survey in dungeons? Oh no. At the start of each dungeon, there's a repeatable daily where you can insert keystones to buff the instance. Not the players, it's the actual instance as a whole. So if you wipe, you can still keep the buff without having to complete the quest again. None of these buffs are huge, but they will just make things a little bit quicker. For example, in Blackrock Caverns, you can take 5% less damage with a Dwarf Runestone. In Halls of Origination, it increases movement speed with a Tolvir Stone. In Stonecore, you can take 5% less damage. In Vortex Pinnacle, you get life and mana regen. In Lost City of Tolvir, you can get 10% bonus damage to pretty much everything in there. Grim Batol, 5% crit chance. Throne of the Tides, 10% bonus damage to Naga. Zola Man, chance to summon small Armani Bear Cub Guardians when dealing damage or healing. And for Zol Gurub, chance to summon small Raptor Hatchling Guardians when dealing damage or healing. So just really cool little extra bits, you know, where it's a secondary profession. When have we ever really worried about secondary professions with heroics or dungeons? So just another cool benefit to having archaeology. And that's it really. Archaeology is a cool profession. It brings lots of rewards and lots of reason to do it. But me personally, I do feel like one character will be enough. Like and subscribe, follow me on Kick, links in the description. See you on the next one.